So first of all, I want to thank you all for sticking around for the last panel, last presentation. Has been a very exciting time to be in this conference and also to start wrestling with these different ideas and pushing the boundaries of what we're trying to deal with, which is masculinities, which is the topic of this conference. And my presentation, what it means to be a man, it's try to explore opportunities and challenges that we're facing while doing this work. So let me start by walking you through what I'm trying to achieve today. The first thing is to talk about what it means to be a man today and the construction of traditional masculinity. And to do that, I'm going to use, first I'm going to walk you through being a man and becoming a man as two different elements but that intertwine. And the second part is the concept of traditional masculinity using the 3 Ps developed by Delby Gilmore in 1991 and using also the concept of hegemonic masculinity of Connell. Then I want to talk about that concept of transformation of masculinity and also make a little comparison to this kind of notion of masculinity on crisis and how sometimes we have that discussion, right? Not trying to get to say which one is right or wrong, but just to know that it's present and that's something we have to address. And then explore what does it mean to be a man today. And to rely on providing some sort of insights or information on that question, I'm going to use the work that I've been doing in the past year specifically with this social platform called Defying Gender Roles that is on online initiative on Facebook. I'll tell you more about it. But that's the source of information where I'm getting all these different exposition and exposure to examples, information, the works that others are doing. And then try to explore under that lens how we can expand the vision of what it means to be a man using that traditional framework that Gilmore gave us. So it's building upon something that has been present and try to figure out new ways to explore it. And the final reflection is now what? Now that we have all this information, what are we going to do with it? So let me start with this notion of traditional construction of masculinity, in which we have that conception of being a man directly related to the biological sense of it and the normative notions of what it means to be a man and a woman. And we kind of wrestle between that two options. Like there's no other option beyond this. And by that regard, then, when you are identified as a man, then it comes with an expectation that you will one day become a man. And that construction of becoming a man comes in opposition. So it doesn't come about your own identity, but what you are not. And in this case, I'm presenting in construction in opposition to 3 identities: being a woman or a girl, being a boy, and being homosexual. So what are the rules to become a man? The first rule is don't be a girl or a woman. So it's don't wear pink, don't play with dolls, don't cook or clean, don't show your emotions. And then you are not a woman or a girl. So again, it's not about who you are, it's who you are not. So when we check the box, then we go to don't be a boy. The first one is don't cry. So you shut your emotions first, and then you don't cry, because crying is expression of weakness. And that's the contrary to what we want to show, which is strength and being a strong person. Don't say no to sex. Men don't say no to sex. We're incapable to do that under that traditional notion of masculinity. Don't be weak. Don't let others call you names. So stand up and stand out and make sure that people respect you for who you are. Then you're no longer a boy. And the third one is don't be gay. And that means don't act like a woman or like a girl. So that feminized part of us as human beings get totally rejected. Don't use certain colors. It's that dichotomy of, oh, it's a boy, so you gotta buy something blue, or it's a girl, something pink, which is something that is still very ingrained and prevalent in the visions of what it means to be a man. Don't use certain expressions. Don't be sensitive. Don't date men. And then you're not gay. And so what happens? Congratulations. You have become a man. What's the problem with this? That within this framework, the ability to fulfill these requirements on a daily basis in every situation is basically impossible. So this is a structure that is leading us to feel that we're failing to become men and to be men, and it is constantly emasculating us. So when you're confronted with that measurement of who you are and what you represent in society, then you're trying to achieve something that it's impossible for any human being, and in this case for men, to achieve and embody. So now let's look at this being a man, becoming a man in the framework of construction of masculinity. And for this I use the the three P's that David Gilmour developed in his Manhood in the Making study in the 90s. So we have these notions of provider, protector, and procreator. And I have here Frank Oakenfeld from Mad Men. I've never seen the show, but everybody talks about it and how he embodies that 50s American kind of macho man and what it implies. And let us explore one by one. So let's go to the provider. And the provider has meant historically breadwinner. You're the one who is in charge to bring the money for the family. And that represents in one being the money maker and being the one who provides financially. Second, being the decision maker at home. So you don't consult decisions. You take roles of leadership and you basically assume that what is said by you, it has to be done in your household. And the third one is that you are in control. You're in control of the situation. You're in control of yourself. You're in control of the emotions of others. And the kind of rite of passage that we can see in society on this is independence. It's when you're able to say, I don't depend on anyone. I don't rely on my parents. It's myself. I am my own man, and I'm just taking the world in front of me as it comes. The second one is about being a protector. And this plays out in different ways. It goes from, in the first part, having the capacity to care for others in multiple ways. One is against aggressors and intruders. And we see this in the bars, in the schools, in the day-to-day, in the capacity of exercising and using force and violence as a valid means to defend. The second one is that reputation of pride, that as men, we have to be constantly proving that we are men. And this happens in different moments and in different spaces. And in this notion of traditional masculinity, you have to be ready to perform all the time, to be ready to jump up and say, you're not going to say these things to me. You're not going to act in this way. I'm not going to allow it. And if you have to use force for doing this, it's socially and culturally accepted in many ways. And the third one is that heroic spirit, right? Is that notion that we have from movies, from films, from TV of the superhero, the person that saves the day, the risk taker, and the inability to show fear, because showing fear means showing weakness, and if you want to be a man, you can't show weakness. And what it does is that violence in many ways becomes a rite of passage between being a boy and becoming a man. And each of us can think about instances as men in which we had to deal with a situation of violence. In my case, that's how I made the transition in high school, fighting somebody else in a situation that I didn't understand. But it's a very present. Sometimes it could be less physical, but it's still present. And finally, this notion of procreator and being the stallion, right? Being the man that can perform with women, and it represents in three ways. The capacity to reproduce, your gene pool going to the next generation, the ability to pursue. And this is, you go after women. Women don't come after you. You don't go to a bar and ask, ladies send you a drink and you feel fine about it. It's you do and you perform in that way. And it's kind of, like in the third one, that perform part of it, it has to do also with the way in which you approach situation and you approach women, but also sexually performance. And these kind of rite of passages are on one side on sex and sexual activities, but on the other one is on fatherhood. That you're able to prove that you're a man because you are able to father. And what it does is that in this kind of a structure, it reinforces the ability of building this notion of hegemonic masculinity as presented by Connelly in a way that is a part of practices that allow men's dominance over women to continue. So this is an iterative process in which we're reinforcing one of the different pieces in a context that allow that to happen. But let's talk now about this notion of transformation of masculinity. But the first is this actually happening? Is masculinity transforming? And what I argue is that it is, because the traditional gender norms and roles are changing. And are changing in different spheres in our lives, in different areas. And it's becoming more visible thanks to technology, social media, discussion, so it's more difficult to ignore. However, what I want to focus my attention here is that women's roles have changed and evolved. And that's something we have seen, especially because as men, many of us don't come from a strong background and concept knowledge of men's theory. We learn about masculinity through the lens of feminism. And one of the challenges we face as men is that women are way more robust and well develop in their thoughts about these issues, and we learn through them. So we have seen how in the last 50, 60 years those changes have been documented and are present. However, when we look at masculinity and being a man and becoming a man in opposition to women, and when women are performing on those 3 Ps that we saw before, more similar to what men do, so the question is, who are we as men? If we're building opposition to women, but women are more similar to men, so who are we? And I think that that's when we start talking about the crisis of masculinity, right? That the crucial stage or turning point in the course of what it means to be a man, but also if we're talking about transformation, something more of that evolution path in going from a different sense of what it means to be a man. And like I said before, I don't have an answer to it's A or B. It's just that it is important to acknowledge that this is part of the conversation we're having, and it allows us to enhance the ability to discuss these topics from different perspectives. And based on the work that I've been doing with this project called Defying Gender Roles, which is basically an online initiative, a Facebook group, I invite you to check it out, and if you like it, to like it and share it and engage in the conversation, is the masculinity is transforming. And to say that, I wanna tell you 3 things about this space. The first one is that one of the elements that I have seen working on gender issues for the past 6 years is that we tend to conceive gender as silos of work. So we work on sexual and reproductive rights, we work on women's political participation, we work on mental health. But it's very complicated in many ways to connect the dots and bring that experience of how gender shapes your life into the day-to-day of life. And that's something that for me is very important, because it's the possibility to make visible how gender roles and gender norms affect and shape and limit your experience in life. So this space is thought as a space for critical reflection. And in this case, I use Brazilian sociologist Paulo Freire notion of critical reflection, which is to have the privilege of think about the elements that shape and affect your life and who you are, in order to make decisions about how you shape that reality. And this concept comes from the returning humanity to others. So when you are unable to have that critical reflection, you tend to be oppressed or objectivized. And when that happens, you're unable to shape your own reality. So the power of who you are and who you can be, it's taken away from you. So the first step on this process of gaining awareness is, how do we create and foster a critical reflection in a moment in which we stop and we think and we start analyzing, instead of going around and saying to people, this is bad, this is good, this is how you should do it, right? So in this notion, and following on Freire's idea, is that in society we have oppressed and oppressors. And the only way in which the oppressed would be liberated is by liberating the process, the oppressors. And I have used this as part of the fundamental basis for the theory of change of the work that I'm trying to do here, which is men are not only the oppressors, men are also oppressed. By what? By a system that is broader than us, which is a patriarchal system that tells us how we should behave, how we should act, and that limit our experience in life as well. So it's making that awareness that we're expanding from categories of being men, women, or in this traditional view, to how the system in place affects and limits our experience in life. So based on that work, what I want to show you now is these notions of what it means to be a man today. And let me start with what it means to be a man. And then we're challenging this biological and normative notion of what it means to be a man. And then we're not going only to say, oh, you were born as a man, as a woman, or you were assigned a sex when you were born that doesn't match with who you are and who represents you. And then we're talking about gender identity in general, in which we have a concept of biological sex. Like I said, it could be the one that you were born with, the one that was assigned to you when you were born. Your sexual orientation as a component, but not what defines you as a human being. Your gender expression and the gender roles that are attributed to you in different societies of what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman, or neither or both, right? The second part, in terms of becoming a man, it's that we're moving from being built in opposition to be building our own identity. And one of the elements that I want to highlight is that the expression of gender is a very personal, deep experience. And in spite of having similarities among the people that, for instance, are in this room, our own experience of gender and gender identity is very unique. And we're finding in that diversity the ability to express that, which can create certain social situations in which people reject it, people appreciate it and take it, but what I want to show is that it's there, and it's a part of the discussion and conversation we're having today. And in addition to that, then how the rules to become a man change. The first one is that the process matters. So it's a process of critical reflection of who you are, what you stand for, what are the elements that shape your life. Then that goes when you actually are reflecting critically about how you're thinking and seeing this element of yourself. It's to walk the walk, which is how do you start reviewing your behaviors, your attitudes, and your practices. And then when you're able to do that reflection, you move to build and reconstruct. So this is an iterative process in which you're going to different levels of understanding of who you are, and by doing so, you understand how you behave, and by doing so, you understand how you can challenge yourself and go to the next step. So the result is that you are in the process to be the man you want to be, but it's not the end goal. It's the process in which you're going of personal growth, and that you're a work in progress. And sometimes when I think about this in my own life, is that I have to wake up every day and think, I'm gonna try not to be misogynist today. I'm gonna try to be curious but understanding today. I'm gonna try to ask the questions that I need to ask to understand better how other people are experiencing life, in order to understand better how I perceive them and how they perceive me. So it's like we're a work in progress. And finally, I want to use the same 3 P's of manhood as a conceptual framework to say this is not, the framework is not bad, it's how we use it and how we apply it. And as I want to explore this, the first thing is that we have a diverse group of men, right? And this is an element that I want to take into consideration strongly, because we don't have one model that we want to pursue. There are, as I said, we are all unique, but also there are different expressions and different ways in which you can be a man today. In terms of the provision, so it changes. It's not that you are the provider solely, it's that you provide and you're being provided by. And this doesn't restrict only to heterosexual couples. It's the same way around in same-sex couples. And the 2 elements that I want to analyze here, one is the decision making. In the context of the US, in many instances, it's about financial constraints. Who works, who stays at home, who's making more money, are you working to pay daycare? So it becomes a matter of being practical and pragmatic also. And what this has done is that it has give a different significance to the value of caregiving. And it's a present discussion in our society today in the US. And it's shifting and pushing the experience of and the expectations of who provides that caregiving. And one of the interesting elements I want to highlight is the stay-at-home dads. And just to give you a stat that I think is relevant for this is that in the US in 2014, the Bureau of Economics said that there were around 200,000 to 14,000 stay-at-home dads based on the stats they manage. But the Pew Institute in 2012 said that there are around 2 million. So that's a big discrepancy, right? When you're thinking about a public policy standpoint and what are the policies you're going to push in order to understand that new reality.
You finish in 3 minutes.
Perfect, thank you. In the side of the protector is that the protection can be for others. The protection and being a protector start with yourself. And I want to highlight those 2 elements. One is the capacity of learn about emotions. And I want you to think about the men in your life and think about how many times have you seen the men of your life mad and angry. And then think about how many times have you seen the men in your life crying. And I'm pretty sure that you have seen less times the men in your life crying than angry. Because anger is something that we're socially accepting, while crying is something that we reject. So how do we start to articulate those emotions? Sometimes my struggle has been that sometimes I'm mad at something, but I don't know at what. So I have to take a step back and try to figure out what is making me mad and learning, because we're not socialized to learn that. And in terms of health, it's like taking care of yourself. We have high rates of suicide that affect more men than women. We have psychological issues that as men, we're not taking the step to get attention. And also the risk-taking that we have as men in sex and reproductive practices. And finally, the procreator, and it's going beyond biology. And I want to highlight two elements here. One, in terms of paternity, is that 80% of men will become fathers in their lifetime. So what does it mean to be a father today? And this morning was a great presentation about being a father while being gay, same-sex couples. And we're having these discussions in many ways. We don't understand if labeling helps, but it just put it out there, and we're trying to figure out that together. And also the element of sexual orientation. You don't need a man to be family and have kids. You have so many, science have evolved, but also, mechanisms of adoption, etc. So it pushes from that because your sexual orientation, then you can father. And finally, that there are three new elements in this equation, which is the notion of privilege and this advantage do you enjoy. Sometimes you earn it, sometimes you don't, and how that changes your experience in life. The relationship of power, understanding gender as a structural power relation in which some people are being oppressed, some people are being the oppressors, and intersectionality, which is we don't work on hegemonic population, and understanding the nuances help us to understand better how we can couple with the challenges. Finally, the now what. So I think that there are challenges and opportunities in having this discussion. The first one is that there's a work in progress, and we don't have all the answers, but it seems that the more we talk about it, we discuss about it, we push about this, we're having better questions to ask, and that's very important. The second one is that we have to push beyond gender. That notion of looking only at gender, it's restrictive, and it doesn't allow us to gain the momentum we need in order to push for the changes. And this is why I include privilege, power, and partnerships as part of it. And finally, that it is important to connect the dots, to create a common narrative, and stop working on silos, and rather try to have a cohesive way of starting to tell our stories together. Thank you.